It is good to be with you this morning. After Shrove Tuesday, stepping into a Wednesday that we have not yet experienced. Perhaps we have been to an Ash Wednesday service before, but today is a first. We have not had a day like today. I've not had a week like this week. I went on a very random, wild rabbit trail this week of learning about the worldwide burial rituals in which ensue all around us. They're fascinating. The first one, far, far away, Madagascar. What do they do during their burial service? It's called Dancing with the Dead. Upon someone's death, every other year or so, they are reminded of the dead by opening up the graves, taking the remains and rewrapping them. They give them a little dance. That's how they like to say it in their culture. Many like to bury their dead on cliffs or high up on a city hill, perhaps overlooking a sea, like the Nordic countries. Perhaps this is closer to God. There's a religious ceremony of large parades, such as in Central America, where Mother Mary in a large statue tends to appear and is carried from foyer to foyer throughout the week of the festivities. Families hosting a large statue of Mother Mary. You aren't anticipating that and wake up to find one in your house. It is quite startling. And yet the Central American communities find death to be a vibrant moment, a celebration of life. And if you've ever been near a cemetery in perhaps Guatemala, Mexico, or El Salvador, you will see the bright colors and are reminded of them honoring the dead. Another is in South Korea, where after cremation, they take the ashes and create beads. They color them, or they become very ornate. Some have unique designs and are placed on glass bowls where they can be displayed for those to be reminded of those who have come before them and honor those lives. I wonder how far we would go if we recognize our ever-changing life is worth dressing up and intentionally honoring to such an extent. For is not change, even everyday change, a kind of death? As we settle into the uniqueness of the coming season, moving from Shrove Tuesday to eyeing the ashes before us, settle into your seats. Recognize that we have entered a new month. The seasons, at least today, feel like they're shifting, and we're thankful for a warmness ever fleeting in the air. Perhaps we are called to reawaken a new sense of purpose and calling. As I reviewed the lectionary for this week, I was reminded of the repetitious echoes Scripture holds. Both Old Testament scriptures that I could have chosen from today were almost the exact same, completely different books. But we went with Isaiah 58, and as I read through it, I realized that Isaiah is in deep lament. He is disheveled by what is happening around him as God's people are in torment and change, ever shifting. And as I read, Lamentations came to mind. Specifically, Lamentations 3:20 through 24. For if Isaiah is in lament, what better way to learn about his struggle than through the book of lament itself? Lamentations 3:20 through 24 states, I will remember them, and my soul, oh, how downcast within me. Yet this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed. For his compassions never fail. They are new, perhaps we say even sweet, every morning. Great is your faithfulness, O Lord. I say to myself, the Lord is my portion, therefore I will wait for him. Both the book of Lamentations and Isaiah are wrestling with change and death in the midst of God's people. Lamentations is after the destruction of Israel in 586 BC. And this section of Isaiah, as he laments, is during the anticipated or perhaps the actual fall to the people of Israel, to the Babylonians. Change is in the air, death is in the air, and so lament rises. Lamentations helps us to categorize this kind of poetic lament, namely displaying what is termed as a city lament, a gathering or communal lament ushered by the prophetic words that are written in Scripture. Lament verses such as intense questioning in Isaiah 58 wonders out loud for or towards the people of God in distress. It is the prophet holding a stance of humility. It is okay to get down into the dirt, into the grime, and hold before the Lord the needs of communal lament. A humbling of the soul and an honesty of words that can draw back a people to the presence of God. Today, we are enacting a form of communal gathering in poetic lament. The scripture beckons us to consider the ashes and communally lower our hearts to sojourn into the story of lament, into the story of Christ. It is through recognizing this over and over again used poetic stance of Scripture that we take hold of humility and move forward into change, into death, even as we sit and move and breathe. Therefore, despite the dichotomy, chasing this death which is inside of the new. In the first section of Isaiah, ushers us into poetic lament. The second half moves us into a charge. George MacDonald writes, "But who are we? We wake up and we are born again, indeed. But when we awake, our souls unnumbered times must choose it over and over again in a day." Isaiah writes in verse 6, chapter 58, "Is not this the kind of fasting I have chosen, to loose the chains of injustice and untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free and break every chain?" Isaiah is hoping to move the people into life that is inside of the death, that is not only encroaching their community, but might also be encroaching upon their faith. That deeper dive into a life of release, found only in lowering yourself before the one who made you. This is life's ultimate change and call. In Psalm 103, the author writes, "God's mercy towards those who fear and honor him is greater than the heights of the heavens." Seize this moment. This release inside, allowing God to be in the midst of all things that we bring as we receive our ashes, even in the change, even in the unknown and the unexpected, the unforeseen. This change brings life itself. I asked Rob if I could share a story that happened to us this month. We had the honor of being with his dad on his his deathbed this past January. And it was expected. He had been walking with leukemia for some time. I was very thankful to be able to fly back. Rob had been back for a week or so, but I was able to fly back for the last 24 hours of his life. And there wasn't much we could do. To be honest, Rob and his stepmom were the hospice care. They were ever close and present with this dear man. And I was thankful to come in as the final guard. He had intense terminal agitation. He was near. Interestingly enough, he didn't really want to take the meds that were helping him. And so in the final hours of his last night, Rob and I had the honor of each holding a hand and just being present in his room. Despite not having the medicine he needed, in the midst of our prayer, his father fell into a peaceful sleep for about an hour and a half. And Rob and I just sat there amazed. How can there be peace inside of this hardship? The body wearing away. How can there be no pain? How can there be sleep? We claimed it as a movement of God. It could be no other. For in the change, God comes to make life, even in death. For those who are left behind, we were given a gift of this memory, and it is called back to me many times. And as I stand before you today, I offer it to you as a moment that even in the midst of change and hardship, God comes to offer immense peace. Your light will break forth like the dawn, Isaiah writes. Christ made a clear and intentional way towards life that is the sacrifice of life. It begins this hour as we move forward down the aisle. Let's consider the power of the movement in awakening death. From self-sustaining individuals to moving towards a communal self-reflection and reworking. It is this that we come to receive in a stance of self-reflection. We offer ourselves, taking on the grace of the Lord, knowing that even though we are made weak, he has been allowed to be made strong. Lent can be a time of seeking and claiming joy in the midst of lament. So if you come forward today in self-reflection, I encourage you to receive and return back, seeking the joy that is found in the midst